Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Lori Merrell with the International Public Safety Data Institute, and I'm thrilled to be with you today to share some information on presumptive cancer laws and exposure tracking. Just to tell you a little bit more about the IPSDI, we are a collaboration of fire service organizations, primarily funded by the Assistance to Firefighters grants through FEMA. We also work very closely with the CDC and NIOSH, and are currently working with NIOSH to help build the National Firefighter Cancer Registry, to be known as the National Firefighter Registry, as well as the CDC on tracking COVID-19 exposures. Cancer in the fire service, we are now learning that more than 66% of the line of duty deaths as reported to the IFF between the years of 2002 and 2019 are in fact reported as occupational cancer deaths. Based on that type of reporting, we know that the IFF and others have worked very hard through the years to try to establish presumptive laws in the United States and Canada. And today there are more than 48 states with cancer presumption, but these laws are incredibly varied. In fact, most recently, lately New Jersey has joined, and even Colorado has added breast cancer to their presumptive law. So as we go through some of these laws, and you're going to be able to see some of the differences, it's very important that you understand that these laws are not completely ironclad, and that there are some requirements in the laws for exposure tracking. Canada has been very successful as well, with more than 12 provinces there and territories with cancer presumptive laws. You'll note the differences with some of the colors, the states being presumptive, true presumptive laws, and we'll talk more about what that means in just a moment, and others only expressing benefit eligibility. So let's talk just a moment about what is a presumption, right? Presumptive laws are expected to link a particular occupation with the disease or condition shown to be hazardous and associated with that occupation, like cancer associated with firefighting. As a result of that linkage, because research has shown it to be so, then that disease or condition is presumed to have come from that occupation. So that's where the word or presumption comes from, particularly applicable to our cancer presumptive laws. Now, what are some of the requirements in the laws? The concept is that the burden of proof is removed for the firefighter, linking their exposure to the disease. So initially, this is true, and I want you to pay attention to that word initially, because that's the whole point of a presumption, is that it is presumed if you get cancer and you are a firefighter, that your cancer came from exposures on that job. In other words, the balance of probabilities are that that's where you were exposed to carcinogens and that led to disease. However, there are other requirements in the law that you must meet, and that's where most firefighters fail to understand the real requirements in the law. They believe that presumption is carte blanche and that it is all that there is. Well, there is more, and this is why I want you to understand more about these laws. Particularly, we're going to focus on the exposure tracking requirements. You see, any kind of presumption, as I said to you, it is not carte blanche, and it can be challenged, and often is. So it does not guarantee the approval of a claim if you get cancer. You submit a workers' comp claim, or if you're retired and you submit a claim to your pension system, it does not guarantee, because there's a presumptive law in place, that that claim will be processed and approved. In fact, most of them, as I said, initially are denied. So legal presumption always allows for the employer to rebut the claim. It allows for insurance companies to rebut the claim, and your pension system if you are retired and your health care coverage or your workers' comp post-employment comes from a pension plan. So anybody can challenge a claim of presumption if you get cancer. So what happens if that occurs? The level of proof then is reserved for us, and defined for the rebuttal. So as I said to you initially, there is no burden of proof on the firefighter. It is presumed if you get cancer that it came from the job. But if there is a challenge, now there is some burden of proof. And there can be where you have to meet more of like a 50 percentile threshold, where we're looking at preponderance of the evidence, or more of a 99% threshold where we're looking at clear and convincing proof. So if a claim is rebutted, the firefighter's counter arguments may become more difficult. And this is where exposure tracking is absolutely key. The firefighter must prove three things if the burden of proof shifts to you. And that is that an injury or illness has occurred, i.e. cancer, or it has, and I should say, that it occurred while you were working, and that there is a link between the two. Something from the job led to your cancer. So the link, or that the proof of that linkage, is what the presumptive law is supposed to remove. But again, if it's challenged, that burden can shift, and you will need evidence to show the link. And that's where exposure tracking comes in. So what are the exposure requirements? Most states with cancer presumptive laws or a cancer benefit will have an exposure requirement. So I encourage you, please go look at your laws. As I said to you at the beginning, they are all different. And it's very important that you know what is covered in your law, because not every cancer is covered in every state. And exposure tracking is in almost all of them. So there are very few that have no exposure requirement written into the law itself. An exposure still must be, and even if it's not, that exposure must still be shown for a claim to be processed. And so please understand that, again, these presumptions are not carte blanche, and it must still, to process a claim, even without an exposure requirement written into the law, you can be required to have to show evidence of exposure to process the claim, meeting that three-pronged test that we just talked about. So every firefighter in every state and every province should be tracking your exposures on the job. There are different exposure requirements by definition, depending on the states, and we'll get into to a couple of these. For example, exposure to smoke, fumes, carcinogenic, poisonous gas, toxic chemical substances, and you can see there, while in the performance of your duties as a full-time paid firefighter. So read the laws. This is where this exposure reporting comes into play. Here's a couple of other examples. These are directly from state laws. Exposure to a known carcinogen that is defined by the International Agency of Research on Cancer. Do you know about IARC? IARC actually defines and shows the linkages of the toxic substances that contribute to or can be causal of cancer. And so often your laws will reflect or cite IARC right in the law. Demonstrates or he or she was exposed while in the service of the department or unit to a known carcinogen as defined by IARC. So many of your laws may reference this source. Again, being exposed to a toxic substance while in the line of duty, right? So this language, and these are directly taken from 3 different laws. So again, all of these state laws are very different. So examples of exposure requirements. Required to work in the midst of or are subject to heavy smoke and fumes, carcinogenic, poisonous, toxic chemical gases. So it will list what you have to show that you were exposed to. There's another one, exposure to heat, smoke, or fumes. You actually participated in a training, drill, or exercise that involved firefighting, right? So you still have to show these exposures and what you were exposed to while actively firefighting. And this is where exposure tracking comes in. Now, the IPSDI, as I said to you, is a collaboration of fire service organizations. And it's important that you understand, coming together, we began to develop new tools. And in fact, the Infor's National Fire Operations Reporting System Exposure Tracking app was actually developed by this collaboration of organizations. You see, even though the IPSDI is new, our research council is not. In fact, we are the same research group that involves the IFC, the IFF, the Metro Chiefs, NIST, UL, Underwriters Laboratory, right? Urban Institute, University of Texas at Austin, and others. And we developed these tools with the same team that did the NIST studies, if you recall, the high-rise and the residential fireground reports. So our council is not new, but the tools we're developing to make it better for you, both operationally and then for exposure tracking, linking these exposures to incidents, making it much more simple for you to have your career diary. That's what we do with the Enforce tool. So if you have not heard about the Enforce mobile tracking app, it is free in app stores. It works on iOS and Android. You can download it even now and begin to keep your career diary. This was formulated specifically for firefighters to be able to keep their own data. Because when you retire and your cancer shows up 2 years post-retirement, how many of you would be able to go back to your fire department and say, I need to see a list or find a log of the calls that I went on when I was on the job so I can show evidence of exposure for my claim, right? How many fire departments are gonna have that data? There will be a few, but not overwhelmingly so. So this app and the information that you complete on the job now will stay with you in perpetuity. It is so important that you have this career diary. So I encourage you, download the app. Again, developed with monies and funding from the Department of Homeland Security FEMA Assistance to Firefighters grants, to which we are so grateful. And also our philanthropic partner, the Ramsey Social Justice Institute, who contributed to this app. So download it, start your career diary. Not only will you track your exposures to fire and the products of combustion here, but also COVID-19 tracking, which is another exposure that we're not quite sure what long-term effects of COVID-19 will be for those of you who have contracted it on the job. Track those exposures. We also have in your behavioral health module. So there are multiple modules in the app that is so important for you to keep and understand why tracking your exposures are so important. Part of what we do at Enforce as well is to make sure that you have as little data entry as possible, because we know you don't really like doing that. And so we try to connect with your department's information through your CAD or RMS system so that we can then give you a secure code to automatically download your incident data into your phone. So you don't have to re-enter an incident number or an address where you responded. All you do is complete the exposure portion. What were your duties on scene? Were you exposed to smoke, right? Did you have to clean your gear when it was over? So all of these questions that help you document those exposures are so important. So if we link with your department first, download the data so you don't have to re-enter it, then it becomes much easier to keep your diary in perpetuity in a cloud-based, secure, encrypted environment that is secure to you. So if you have more questions about your presumptive laws or how to track your exposures, this is my information. Please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you more about exposure tracking, about downloading and using that app, and what other tools we may have that will help you and your department going forward. Please begin now. Download the app, track your exposures, and we look forward to hearing from you.